The strangest thing about hearing every thought in the world is that the one voice you want to hear most is the only one you can never understand. Adrian Whitmore had lived with that truth for 34 years. As the CEO of Whitmore International, he had mastered the art of looking untouchable. Millions of dollars moved because of his decisions. Hundreds of employees waited for his approval, and every room became quieter the moment he walked in. People called him brilliant, intimidating, impossible to read. They never knew the truth. Adrian was the one reading everyone else. Every meeting, every handshake, every conversation came with a storm of invisible voices. Doubts, plans, secrets, worries. He could hear the excitement of a new employee hoping for a promotion, the nervous thoughts of an executive hiding a mistake, even the silent complaints of someone pretending to agree with him. After years of hearing everything, Adrian had learned one thing. Most people never said what they truly felt. Then Ethan Parker walked into his office. Ethan was 26, a junior designer who looked like he had accidentally wandered into a building full of people wearing expensive suits and carrying briefcases. His dark blonde hair was slightly messy, his blue eyes were focused, and he held a folder so tightly that Adrian could hear the nervous thoughts before Ethan even spoke. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. I'm Ethan Parker from the creative department." His voice was polite and professional. But then Adrian heard the thought behind it. "Please don't notice that I practiced this introduction in my car for 10 minutes. Adrian froze. Not because the thought was unusual. He had heard thousands like it. He froze because Ethan's thoughts were not trying to impress him. They were honest. Completely honest. Ethan looked around the office with quiet amazement. "This place is huge. I'm pretty sure my entire apartment could fit inside this conference room." Adrian almost smiled. Almost. Ethan continued explaining his design proposal, unaware that every word he spoke was competing with the thoughts running through his mind. He worried about whether his ideas were good enough. He wondered if the CEO thought he was wasting everyone's time. He even silently reminded himself to stop shaking his hand. But beneath all that nervousness, Adrian heard something else. Ethan wasn't thinking about money, status, or gaining influence. He was thinking about creating something meaningful. He was thinking about making people feel something. For the first time in years, Adrian listened to someone and didn't feel exhausted. The room became quiet. Not because Ethan stopped talking, because Adrian realized something impossible. Ethan was the only person whose thoughts made the noise in his own mind disappear. "Mr. Whitmore?" Ethan asked, pulling him back. "Did you have any questions?" Adrian looked at him carefully. The employee standing in front of him had no idea he had just changed everything. "No," Adrian replied calmly. "Actually, I think I've heard enough." Ethan blinked, unsure if that was good or bad. Adrian watched his expression change and heard the immediate worry behind his silence. He almost told him not to worry. Almost told him that for the first time, someone's unspoken words were more valuable than anything they could say out loud. Instead, he simply said, "I'll see you tomorrow, Ethan." As Ethan left the office, Adrian remained by the window overlooking the city. For years, he believed hearing every thought was a gift. But now he wondered if it had only been waiting for the right person to prove that silence could be more powerful than noise. The next morning, Ethan Parker arrived at Whitmore International 15 minutes early. He told himself it was because he wanted to be prepared. The truth was much simpler. He was terrified of making a mistake in front of Adrian Whitmore. Ethan stepped into the marble lobby, holding his coffee cup carefully while employees moved around him like they had done it 1,000 times before. Everyone seemed confident. Everyone seemed like they belonged. Ethan looked down at his slightly wrinkled shirt and quietly wondered if the building security team could somehow tell he was the person most likely to spill coffee on an important document. Across the city, Adrian was already in his office, staring at a stack of reports he had not read. Normally, the constant stream of thoughts from everyone around him made concentration nearly impossible. But that morning, his attention was somewhere else. Ethan. He remembered the honesty in Ethan's thoughts from the day before. There had been no hidden ambition, no desire to impress a powerful executive, just a genuine wish to do good work and prove that he deserved to be there. It was unfamiliar. Adrian had spent years surrounded by people who carefully controlled every word and every expression. Ethan was different because his heart and his thoughts seemed to speak the same language. When Ethan entered the office for their scheduled review, Adrian noticed something immediately. The noise in his mind faded. The room felt calmer. Ethan placed the design files on the table and began explaining his ideas. His voice was steady, but Adrian could hear the thoughts beneath it. Please let him like this. Please do not let this be another terrible first impression. Adrian looked at the presentation in front of him. The designs were creative, thoughtful, and surprisingly personal. Ethan had created something that focused on connection rather than simply selling a product. You think about people before numbers, Adrian said. Ethan looked surprised. I suppose I do. The thought that followed made Adrian pause. I hope that does not sound naive. Adrian closed the folder slowly. It does not sound naive. Ethan looked at him, confused. For a moment, Adrian realized he had answered the thought instead of the words. He quickly looked away. Your approach is valuable, he added. Ethan smiled slightly. It was a small smile, but Adrian heard the happiness behind it. He heard Ethan thinking that maybe, just maybe, he belonged there after all. Later that afternoon, Adrian reviewed Ethan's work again. Then he made a decision that surprised even himself. He moved Ethan to a special project that required direct collaboration with the executive office. When Ethan received the message, his first reaction was panic. His second reaction was wondering if Adrian secretly thought he was not good enough. Adrian heard every worried thought before Ethan even arrived. At his office, Ethan, Adrian said, looking up from his desk. You are not being moved because you failed. Ethan stopped. I was not going to say that. Adrian almost smiled. I know. The silence between them lasted only a few seconds, but it felt different. Ethan did not know why Adrian seemed to understand him so easily. Adrian did not know why one person's thoughts had become the only ones he wanted to hear. And somewhere between the unanswered questions and quiet moments, something began to change. For the first time in a very long time, Adrian was not searching for silence. He was searching for Ethan. By the end of the first week working closely with Adrian Whitmore, Ethan Parker had discovered something strange. The most intimidating man in the company was not as impossible to understand as everyone believed. In fact, sometimes Ethan thought Adrian was easier to understand than himself. Adrian always appeared calm, controlled, and completely confident. But Ethan noticed the small things. The way Adrian stayed late after everyone left. The way he quietly fixed problems before anyone else knew they existed. The way he looked out the office window for a few seconds longer than necessary, as if the entire city below felt far away. What Ethan did not know was that Adrian noticed everything about him too. Every nervous thought, every small moment of doubt, every time Ethan wondered if he was good enough. The executive project moved quickly, and Ethan found himself spending more time on the top floor of Whitmore International. At first, he thought being near the CEO would feel stressful. Instead, something unexpected happened. Adrian made the impossible feel normal. He asked for Ethan's opinions. He listened carefully. He remembered small details that most people forgot. One afternoon, Ethan walked into Adrian's office carrying updated designs. He placed the folder down and said, I made some changes based on the feedback from the marketing team. Adrian opened the folder. You changed the entire structure. Ethan immediately worried. That was not the right choice. I should have asked first. I probably ruined the whole idea. Adrian looked up. Why are you? Assuming you made a mistake? Ethan froze. I did not say that. Adrian paused. He knew he had done it again. He had responded to Ethan's thoughts instead of his words. Your expression gave it away, Adrian said smoothly. Ethan looked uncertain but accepted the explanation. He had no idea how close Adrian was to revealing the truth. That evening, the two of them stayed late to finish the presentation. The office was quieter than usual. The city lights reflected against the glass windows, and for once, Adrian did not feel surrounded by invisible voices. He only heard Ethan. Do you ever get tired of being the person everyone expects you to be? Ethan suddenly asked. Adrian looked at him. The question was simple, but it reached somewhere no one had touched before. Why do you ask? Ethan shrugged. I do not know. You just seem like someone who never gets to relax. Adrian stayed silent. Because Ethan was right. The strange thing was that Ethan had not read a report about him. He had not studied his interviews or searched for personal information. He had simply noticed. Adrian had spent his entire life knowing what people thought about him, but Ethan was the first person who understood him without needing access to his thoughts. Later that night, Adrian stood alone in his office after Ethan left. He looked at the empty chair across from his desk. For years, he believed his ability was the reason he could understand people. Now he was beginning to question that belief. Maybe the most important connections were not built from knowing every hidden thought. Maybe they were built from someone choosing to share those thoughts with you. The next morning, Adrian made a decision. He would officially assign Ethan as his personal assistant for the upcoming month-long executive project. It was a practical decision on paper, a simple business arrangement. At least, that was what Adrian told himself. When Ethan received the message, his first thought was immediate panic. Why would the CEO want me that close? Did I accidentally do something wrong? Adrian heard those thoughts from across the hallway. And for the first time in years, the powerful CEO, who could hear everyone else, found himself wanting to laugh. Not because Ethan was wrong, but because Ethan had no idea that the one person he was worried about impressing was already the one person who never wanted him to leave. The first day Ethan Parker officially became part of Adrian Whitmore's executive project team, he expected everything to feel different. He imagined strict schedules, endless meetings, and a level of pressure that would make him question every decision he made. Instead, what surprised him most was how normal Adrian seemed when no one else was watching. The CEO, who appeared untouchable in front of the company, was simply a quiet man who preferred black coffee, organized files, and moments of silence near the office window. Ethan noticed these things without realizing how much Adrian noticed him in return. The new arrangement meant Ethan spent most of his workdays only a few steps away from Adrian's office. Every morning, Ethan walked in with a notebook, a coffee cup, and a collection of thoughts he hoped no one would ever discover. Adrian heard all of them. Please do not trip over the carpet today. Please remember to sound like a professional adult and not someone who still talks to himself while choosing lunch. Adrian had heard thousands of nervous thoughts before, but Ethan's always carried a strange warmth. They were never cruel, never filled with jealousy. Even when Ethan worried, he worried about doing better, helping others, and not disappointing the people around him. One afternoon, the company prepared for a major presentation with an important client. The entire executive floor became busy. Employees rushed between offices, adjusting details and checking information. Ethan noticed Adrian becoming quieter than usual. Everyone else saw a confident CEO preparing for a meeting. Ethan saw someone carrying too much responsibility alone. "Are you sure you are okay?" Ethan asked. Adrian looked up from his documents. Most people asked questions like that because they wanted something. A favor, a promotion, approval. But Ethan's thought was different. I hope he knows he does not have to handle everything by himself. Adrian became completely still. He had heard many people think about him. They admired him. They feared him. They wanted something from him. But no one had simply cared. "I am fine," Adrian answered automatically. Ethan nodded, but Adrian heard the thought that followed. He says that because everyone expects him to say that. Adrian looked away from the computer screen. For a moment, he wondered if Ethan realized how rare that kind of understanding was. During the presentation, Ethan stood beside Adrian and helped explain the creative strategy. He was nervous, but he remained focused. When questions became difficult, Ethan did not panic. He listened, adapted, and found solutions. Adrian watched him with quiet admiration. The employee he thought he needed to protect was becoming someone he could rely on. After the meeting ended successfully, the executive team celebrated the result. Ethan smiled, but Adrian heard the thought behind it. "I'm just glad I did not embarrass myself." Adrian almost laughed. He had never met someone who could achieve something impressive and immediately worry that they had failed. Later that evening, Adrian found Ethan organizing documents before leaving. "You do not have to stay late," Adrian said. Ethan looked surprised. "I know. I just wanted to make sure tomorrow would be easier." Another simple answer. Another honest thought. Adrian watched him carefully. The ability he had spent years hiding from the world had always made people feel distant. It allowed him to know everyone, but it never allowed anyone to truly know him. Ethan was different. Ethan did not know his secret, yet somehow he understood the parts of Adrian that Adrian himself had ignored. As Ethan walked toward the elevator, Adrian realized something that made him uncomfortable. He was no longer keeping Ethan close because of curiosity. He was keeping him close because the world felt quieter when Ethan was around. And for a man who had spent his entire life surrounded by noise, that feeling was becoming impossible to ignore. Adrian Whitmore had always believed that secrets were safer when they stayed hidden. His own secret had followed him for most of his life, a quiet ability that allowed him to hear the thoughts people never intended to share. It was the reason he kept his distance. It was the reason he built walls around himself. But Ethan Parker was slowly becoming the one person who made those walls feel unnecessary. The week after the successful client presentation, Ethan continued working closely with Adrian. Their routine became familiar. Morning meetings, afternoon reviews, late conversations about ideas that had nothing to do with business. To everyone else in the company, Ethan was simply the young designer who had earned the CEO's trust. They did not see the small moments that changed everything. They did not see Adrian pause when Ethan walked into the room because the noise in his mind became quiet. They did not see Ethan secretly smiling whenever Adrian praised his work. One evening, a heavy rain covered the city outside Whitmore International. Most employees had already left, but Ethan remained at his desk finishing a final design update. Adrian stepped out of his office and noticed the lights still on. "You are still here," Adrian said. Ethan looked up. "I wanted to finish this before tomorrow morning." Adrian heard the thought immediately. "I do not want him to think I cannot handle this responsibility." Adrian walked closer. "You know you do not have to prove yourself every single day." Ethan looked confused. "What makes you say that?" Adrian paused. "Because I know." The answer almost escaped. Instead, he looked at the documents in Ethan's hands. "Because your work already proves it." Ethan became quiet. Adrian heard the thought behind his silence. "He actually believes in me." The simple sentence affected Adrian more than he expected. He had heard people praise him countless times. They admired his success, his intelligence, his position. But Ethan valued something different. Ethan cared about being seen. Not as an employee, not as a talented designer. As a person. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. Adrian nodded. "Why did you choose me for this project?" The question was direct. Adrian had expected it eventually, but hearing it still felt different. He could have given a simple business answer. He could have mentioned Ethan's creativity, his skills, his potential. All of those things were true, but they were not the whole truth. "Because you notice things other people miss," Adrian said. Ethan smiled slightly. "That sounds like something you would say about yourself." Adrian looked at him. "Maybe that is why I noticed it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows. The city below continued moving, but the office felt separated from the rest of the world. Ethan looked away, trying to hide his expression. Adrian heard the thought before Ethan could control it. "I wish I knew what he was thinking." Adrian froze. The irony almost felt impossible. Ethan wanted to understand him, while Adrian had spent years knowing everyone except himself. That night, Adrian finally admitted something he had avoided for days. His ability had always given him answers, but Ethan had created questions he actually wanted to solve. Why did this person matter so much? Why did silence feel comfortable around him? Why did he care about every small worry Ethan tried to hide? As Ethan gathered his things to leave, Adrian stopped him. "Ethan." Ethan turned around. "Yes." Adrian looked at him for a long moment. There were countless thoughts he could hear, countless words he could choose. But for once, he wanted to say something that belonged only to him. "Thank you for making this place feel less empty." Ethan smiled softly. "I did not know it felt empty." Adrian watched him leave. He had spent years listening to the world around him. But that evening, he understood something important. The most meaningful words were not always the ones people thought. Sometimes they were the ones they were brave enough to say out loud. For the first time in years, Adrian Whitmore found himself looking forward to ordinary moments. A morning meeting was no longer just another responsibility. A quiet walk through the office was no longer just a routine. Somehow, knowing Ethan Parker would be there changed the entire atmosphere of his day. Adrian still heard every thought around him. He still heard employees discussing deadlines, executives planning strategies, and strangers wondering what kind of person the CEO really was. But those voices no longer felt as overwhelming when Ethan was nearby. Ethan had become the one person who made the world feel quieter. What Adrian did not expect was how difficult it would become to keep his distance. Ethan never tried to impress him. He never acted differently because Adrian was the CEO. He simply treated him like a person. That was something Adrian had never realized he was missing. One Friday afternoon, the company prepared for a major announcement. The executive team gathered in the main conference room. and Ethan was there to present the creative direction for the campaign. Before the meeting started, Ethan stood outside the room reviewing his notes. Adrian approached and noticed the familiar nervous thoughts immediately. I know this presentation is good. I know I prepared. So why does my brain think I am about to forget every word I know? Adrian almost smiled. You are ready, he said. Ethan looked up. I did not say anything. Adrian paused. Another mistake. He had become too comfortable responding to Ethan's thoughts. Your expression, Adrian explained. It looked like you were questioning yourself. Ethan laughed softly. You are surprisingly good at reading people. The words stayed with Adrian. If only you knew. The presentation began, and Ethan performed better than anyone expected. He answered questions clearly, explained his ideas confidently, and proved that his place beside the executive team was deserved. When the meeting ended, several people congratulated him. Ethan smiled, but Adrian heard the thought behind it. I wish my parents could have seen this. The thought was quiet, almost hidden, but Adrian heard the emotion behind it. For a moment, he forgot about the meeting, the company, and everything else. He only thought about Ethan. Later that evening, Adrian found Ethan sitting alone in the office cafeteria with a cup of coffee. Long day? Adrian asked. Ethan looked surprised to see him. A little, but a good one. Adrian sat across from him. It was unusual. The CEO of Whitmore International rarely sat casually with employees. But with Ethan, everything seemed different. You did well today, Adrian said. Ethan looked down at his coffee. Thank you. Then Adrian heard it. The thought Ethan never wanted anyone to know. I wish he knew how much that means to me. Adrian became still. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than any compliment he had heard before. He realized something that unsettled him. His ability allowed him to discover secrets, but Ethan's feelings were not something he wanted to uncover without permission. He wanted Ethan to choose to share them. For the first time, Adrian wanted a truth that was freely given, not one he could simply hear. Ethan, Adrian said quietly, can I ask you something? Ethan looked up. Of course. Adrian searched for the right words. Do you ever feel like people only see one version of you? Ethan thought for a moment. Sometimes. He smiled faintly. I think everyone has parts of themselves they keep hidden. Adrian looked at him, and for once, he wished he could tell Ethan everything. He wished he could explain that he knew the hidden parts of everyone. But Ethan was the only person whose hidden thoughts made him want to become a better man. Instead, Adrian simply said, I think you should know that the version of you I see is already enough. Ethan smiled, and that small moment was more powerful than any secret Adrian had ever discovered. Because for the first time, he was not listening to a thought. He was sharing a feeling. Adrian Whitmore had spent years believing control was the only way to survive. Control over his company. Control over his emotions. Control over the endless voices that followed him everywhere. But Ethan Parker had slowly changed the way he saw the world. Ethan reminded him that not every thought needed to be analyzed. Not every feeling needed to be hidden. Yet Adrian still carried one fear he could not ignore. What if Ethan discovered the truth? What if Ethan knew that every private worry, every quiet hope, and every moment of uncertainty had already been heard? The thought bothered Adrian more than he wanted to admit. Because Ethan was different from everyone else. Adrian did not want to know Ethan's secrets without permission. He wanted Ethan to trust him enough to share them. The following week, Whitmore International prepared for a large company event celebrating the success of the new campaign. The entire building was filled with energy. Employees moved through the halls with excitement, discussing the achievement and preparing for the evening gathering. Ethan arrived early to help organize the final details. Adrian noticed him immediately, not because of his position, not because of his work, because the familiar calm he felt around Ethan returned the moment he entered the room. You are here early again, Adrian said as Ethan placed materials on the table. Ethan looked up with a small smile. I like being prepared. Adrian heard the thought behind his answer. Also, I panic less when I know I have checked everything 5 times. Adrian quietly smiled. Ethan noticed. Did you just smile? He asked. Adrian looked away. No. Ethan laughed. I am pretty sure you did. It was a simple moment. A normal conversation. But to Adrian, it felt rare. People usually changed around him. They became careful. They measured every word. Ethan did not. During the event, Adrian watched Ethan speak with employees from different departments. He noticed something unusual. Ethan remembered names. He listened carefully. He made people feel important. Adrian heard the thoughts of those around them. They respected Ethan. They trusted him. They appreciated him. And Adrian realized something he had not expected. Ethan was not just someone who brought peace into his life. Ethan brought warmth into every room he entered. Later that night, after the event ended, Adrian returned to his office and found Ethan waiting outside with a folder. "I wanted to give you the final report before I left," Ethan said. Adrian accepted it. "You could have sent it tomorrow." Ethan shrugged. "I know, but I thought you might want to see it tonight." Adrian heard the thought immediately. He works so hard. I just want to make his day a little easier. Adrian looked at Ethan carefully. The kindness was effortless. Ethan was not trying to gain anything. He was simply being himself. Then something unexpected happened. Adrian's ability suddenly became quiet. Not completely gone, but distant. For a few seconds, there were no voices from the hallway. No thoughts from the people outside his office. Only silence. Adrian looked surprised. Ethan noticed. "Are you okay?" he asked. Adrian nodded slowly. "Yes, I am." But he was not sure why it happened. The only time the world became silent was when Ethan was near him. Ethan stepped closer, concerned but calm. "You know, you do not always have to pretend everything is fine." Adrian looked at him. Those words felt familiar, because they were the same kindness Ethan showed every day. Adrian had spent his life hearing what people thought, but Ethan was teaching him something much harder: how to listen without needing a special ability. As Ethan walked away that evening, Adrian remained by the office door, thinking about the silence that had appeared for those few moments. For the first time, he wondered if his ability was not disappearing. Maybe it was simply making room for something more important. Trust. Adrian Whitmore had spent his entire life believing that silence was something he could never have. Every day brought hundreds of voices. Every room carried hidden thoughts. Every conversation contained words that were never spoken. He had learned to separate himself from the world because being too close meant knowing too much. But now, standing in his office after Ethan Parker left, Adrian wondered if silence had never been impossible. Maybe he had simply been waiting for the right person to bring it to him. The strange moment from the previous evening stayed in his mind. For a few seconds, his ability had faded into the background. There had been no noise, no endless stream of thoughts, just peace. And Ethan had been standing right there. The next morning, Adrian arrived at Whitmore International earlier than usual. He sat at his desk, looking through reports, but his attention was somewhere else. He was not thinking about business numbers or upcoming meetings. He was thinking about a question he had avoided for years. What if his ability was not a gift that made him stronger? What if it was something that prevented him from truly connecting with people? When Ethan arrived, Adrian noticed the familiar calm. Immediately, "Good morning," Ethan said. Adrian looked up. "Good morning, Ethan." The simple greeting felt different. Ethan smiled. "You seem unusually quiet today." Adrian almost reacted out of habit. He wanted to explain. He wanted to say that quiet was something he had never been able to enjoy until recently. Instead, he simply asked, "Do I?" Ethan nodded. "A little, but in a good way." Adrian looked at him carefully. Even without listening to Ethan's thoughts, he could understand the meaning behind his expression. That realization surprised him. Maybe he did not need his ability as much as he thought. Later that day, a problem appeared with the upcoming campaign. A small detail had been overlooked, and the team needed a solution quickly. Everyone became focused on fixing the issue. Ethan reviewed the information carefully and suggested a new approach. It was not the easiest option, but it was thoughtful and practical. Adrian watched him explain the idea to the team. Ethan was confident, but not arrogant. He listened to everyone's opinions and adjusted his plan when necessary. Adrian realized that Ethan had something rare. He made people feel comfortable enough to be honest. After the meeting, Adrian found Ethan organizing his notes. "You handled that well," Adrian said. Ethan smiled. "Thank you. I was nervous." Adrian looked at him. "You did not seem nervous." Ethan laughed softly. "That is because I have become very good at pretending." The sentence stayed with Adrian. He understood pretending better than anyone. He had spent years pretending that hearing everyone's thoughts did not affect him. He had pretended that being alone was easier. He had pretended that he did not want someone to understand him. "Ethan," Adrian said quietly, "do you ever wish people could know the real you without you having to explain?" Ethan became thoughtful. "Sometimes. But I think everyone deserves the chance to choose what they share." Adrian felt the words deeply. Choose what they share. That was exactly what he wanted from Ethan. Not secrets taken without permission. Not thoughts overheard by accident. Trust. Real trust. That evening, Adrian made a decision. He would stop, relying on what he could hear, and start paying attention to what Ethan chose to show him. When Ethan said goodbye and left the office, Adrian did not listen for the thoughts behind his words. He simply heard his voice. See you tomorrow, Adrian. And somehow, those 3 words meant more than anything he had heard all day. Adrian Whitmore had always believed that understanding people meant knowing everything they refused to say. For years, his ability had shown him the hidden parts of everyone around him. He knew when someone was nervous, when someone was pretending, and when someone was hiding a truth behind a perfect smile. But after everything that happened with Ethan Parker, Adrian finally understood something important. Knowing someone's thoughts was not the same as knowing their heart. The difference was trust, and trust was something that could never be forced. The weeks that followed changed the rhythm of their lives. Ethan continued working with Adrian on the executive project, but their relationship had become something neither of them expected. They talked more. They laughed more. The office that once felt cold and distant slowly became a place where Adrian felt comfortable. One afternoon, Ethan walked into Adrian's office carrying 2 cups of coffee. I brought you one, Ethan said. Adrian looked surprised. You remembered how I like it? Ethan smiled. You always order the same thing. Adrian looked at the coffee in his hand. It was a small gesture, something most people would overlook. But to Adrian, it meant everything. Ethan noticed details because he cared, not because he wanted something in return. Thank you, Adrian said quietly. Ethan smiled. You are welcome. For once, Adrian did not listen for the thought behind those words. He did not need to. He already understood. That evening, the 2 of them stayed late to complete the final presentation for the project that had brought them together. The city lights reflected across the office windows, creating a peaceful glow around the empty room. Ethan looked through the final documents and sighed. It is strange. A few months ago, I never imagined I would be sitting here with the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the country. Adrian looked at him. And now? Ethan smiled. Now I think you are not as scary as everyone says. Adrian raised an eyebrow. That is supposed to be a compliment. Ethan laughed. Definitely. The sound filled the quiet office. Adrian realized he wanted to remember that moment. Not because it was extraordinary, because it was ordinary. And ordinary moments were the ones he had missed the most. After finishing the project, the company celebrated the success with an event attended by employees from every department. Ethan stood among his co-workers, receiving congratulations and encouragement. Adrian watched from a distance. He heard countless voices around him, but he did not feel overwhelmed. His attention stayed on one person. Ethan looked happy, comfortable, confident. The person who once questioned whether he belonged had finally realized he always did. Later, when the event ended, Ethan found Adrian near the entrance. You disappeared, Ethan said. Adrian smiled slightly. I was thinking. Ethan looked curious. About what? Adrian looked at him for a moment. There were so many things he could say. He could explain the years of loneliness. He could explain the ability he carried and the way it changed his life. He could explain that Ethan was the first person who made him want to be understood instead of simply knowing others. But instead, Adrian chose the simplest truth. About how different my life feels now. Ethan became quiet. Then he smiled. I think mine does too. The honesty of that answer stayed with Adrian. No hidden thoughts. No special ability. Just 2 people choosing to be open with each other. As they walked out of the building together, Adrian looked back at the office where he had spent so many years alone. The place had not changed. The city had not changed. He had changed. He no longer wanted to live inside everyone else's thoughts. He wanted to live in moments that were real. Moments shared with someone who chose to stand beside him. And for the first time in his life, silence was not something he feared. It was the place where he finally found peace.